Hi, I'm Marielle from MarielleAccentCoach.com, and I am an American accent coach who works with professionals from all over the world to help them learn how to speak English with a more American accent so they can improve their communication skills for professional contexts. If you've ever been told to relax to sound more American, you've probably wondered what that actually means. I know that all over YouTube you can find a lot of advice where people will tell you to sound more American, you need to relax the consonants. You need to speak in a lazier way. All of the vowels need to be more similar to the schwa. So I want to elaborate on what all of these things mean so that you have a clearer picture of how to apply this advice and how to understand what's holding you back from sounding clearer in American English and from getting a more native-like American accent. First, let's talk a little bit about the schwa and the idea that all of your vowels need to sound more similar to the schwa or that they need to sound a little bit lazier, that you don't want to over-articulate the vowels or move your tongue too strongly. A lot of people hear this advice and they start relaxing their articulation so much that we lose a lot of clarity on the vowels. And they start kind of sounding like they're mumbling a little bit, like they're trying to make sure that their speech doesn't sound too harsh or that their pronunciation doesn't sound too harsh. So they really stop articulating the vowels and they lose the clarity that they could otherwise have in their vowels and therefore in their speech. Vowels are very important in an American accent. So if in an effort to make your accent sound less harsh and to make your speech sound more American, you start over-relaxing your muscles and your vowels disappear, it's not going to have the effect that you're looking for. For those of you who don't really understand what the schwa is, or even if you do, I want to do a little bit of a review here. So the schwa is a very neutral, relaxed vowel where the tongue just sits in the middle of the mouth. It's very neutral, very relaxed, and it's not really making a significant movement forward or back or up or down. It's just sitting right in the middle of the mouth. And we use this vowel every time a syllable is unstressed. So for example, in the word important, 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 you can hear that the first syllable and the last syllable are not stressed, while the one in the middle is because it's louder, it's longer, and more articulated, while the other two syllables are shorter, quieter, and less articulated. My muscles are more relaxed. So here's the thing. Yes, your muscles need to get very lazy on the schwa, but for the other vowels which are stressed, you do actually need more assertive tongue movements. So if you overly relax your tongue for the stressed vowels, your speech becomes a lot less clear. So yes, American English does have a lot of reduced vowels where the tongue is very, very lazy. Every single time the schwa comes up, you need to relax your tongue and make it sit right in the middle of your mouth. But that doesn't mean every vowel should be lazy. For the stressed vowels in any given sentence, you still need clear, conscious movements of your tongue in the direction of the vowel. And your tongue has to change shapes for each vowel, not just always stay in the exact same shape and position of the schwa, because that's where you get kind of a mumbly accent and you become a lot less clear. You don't want to mumble. You do want to make sure that you have conscious, controlled, intentional, assertive movements of your tongue for each individual stressed vowel. In regards to the schwa, though, I will say this. For all other vowels, like ah, e, a, I, ah, all of these vowels do have movements in one direction or another. One of them may be a forward vowel, like a or e. One of them may be a back vowel, like ah or o. But for all vowels, the middle of the tongue does stay pretty much close to the middle of the mouth. It doesn't pull forward a lot. And one thing I do see non-native speakers doing that does make their articulation seem harsh or not relaxed enough is actually the tongue pulling forward too much on all the vowels. If you feel like your tongue is constantly pulling forward on every single vowel, just really, really pushing to get to the front of your mouth, then you do probably need to bring your tongue back a little bit so it stays closer to the center of your mouth. However, that doesn't mean turning that vowel into the schwa. So if your E vowel is sounding like E, 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 it's probably because your tongue is pushing forward too much and it needs to be closer to the center of your mouth. If your A, as in cat, vowel sounds too tight or overly articulated, it's probably, again, because your tongue is pushing forward too much. Cat, where it needs to stay a little closer to the middle of your mouth. Cat. And the same is true for all vowels. So again, the schwa is a vowel where your tongue is in the middle of your mouth, and all vowels need to kind of stay close to the middle of your mouth. So in this sense, yes, all of the vowels do kind of stay close to the schwa in terms of where the tongue is sitting. Not too far forward, not too far back, kind of staying close to the middle of the mouth. However, it's really tricky to apply this on your own because you'll probably just end up making all vowels kind of blend in together and sound similar to each other. Oh my goodness, all vowels need to stay close to the middle of my mouth. So let me just make them all sound similar. The tricky thing is you still need to have assertive movements of your tongue for each individual vowel, and you need to know where your tongue needs to be placed, how it needs to be shaped, and how it has to move for each individual vowel. So you cannot oversimplify things by making all vowels sound similar to each other, because again, that's what creates mumbling. So when I say that for all vowels, your tongue needs to stay a little bit more in the middle of your mouth, I'm talking about the space within your mouth in which you can articulate the vowels. But within that space, the tongue has to make very intentional movements for each vowel. The movements must be conscious and specific. The truth is, you can't just think, I want to relax my articulation. Let me just think my way into relaxing the muscles, because then you can go a little too far with it. Instead, what you need is to retrain the tiny, subtle little movements that your tongue makes so that you're in control of them. And that is exactly what I teach my clients in my one-on-one American accent coaching programs. We work on looking at those little subtle tongue movements for each sound and making sure that they are controlled and that all of the muscle movements are coordinated with each other, because this is what can actually get you to sound more native-like. Now let's talk about consonants and what people mean when they say that you need to pronounce them in a lazier way or you need to relax more. Usually it has to do with 3 specific mouth muscles that have entirely different ways of moving in most other languages compared to how they tend to move in an American accent. And those muscles would be the tip of your tongue, the back of your tongue, and your lips. The tip of the tongue is mainly responsible for consonants like t, d, n, l. The back of the tongue is mainly responsible for consonants like k, g, ng. And your lips are responsible for m, b, p. Again, the way that these muscles move on all of the consonants that they produce tends to be very, very different in other languages and accents from how they move in an American accent. So right now, I'm going to be giving you 3 things to look for that you might be doing when pronouncing consonants with these mouth muscles. The first thing is pulling the tongue forward too much on tip of the tongue consonants or back of the tongue consonants. In an American accent, the tongue tends to stay in the middle of the mouth more. But if your tongue pulls forward a lot on tip of the tongue or back of the tongue consonants, that will make it sound like you're over-articulating the sounds. The second thing is having your tongue stay touching the palate or pressing the palate for too long before it comes off the palate. So when you make an L, holding the palate too long, or when you make a K, leaving your tongue touching the palate too long before it comes away from it. And the third thing has to do with your lips. If your lips stay pressed together for too long before they come apart for lip consonants, this will also make your pronunciation sound too harsh and like it needs to relax more. Ma, ba, ba. So think about it. How many times do each of these sounds produced by each of these sets of muscles reappear again and again throughout a conversation? Several times. You're never going to have a conversation where you don't run into a bunch of tip of the tongue consonants, back of the tongue consonants, and lip consonants, where your tongue is probably moving in these other patterns, while an American's tongue and lips are moving with a different set of patterns. So when your articulation seems too strong or not relaxed enough, it's because you need to learn what the patterns are for how Americans move these muscles in order to keep them more relaxed, but without losing clear articulation, because if you over-relax the muscles but don't change certain root details about the placement of these muscles and how Americans consciously move them, you'll end up with mumbling, and you don't want to mumble. So you need conscious control over the muscles, not to stop using them altogether or completely quit engaging them. From a big picture perspective, American speech relies on a very specific balance of airflow. If you cut the airflow too aggressively for consonants and you don't let it continue for long enough on the vowels, your speech will sound tight, harsh, and foreign. Part of why an American accent sounds the way that it does is that we tend to not linger on consonants. We tend to not articulate them for very long or hold them for very long before moving on to a vowel. So consonants tend to be shorter and vowels tend to be longer. But above all, what happens when you make a consonant versus a vowel? When you make a vowel, your tongue kind of hangs in midair in the middle of your mouth. E, A, I, but it doesn't touch anything. So therefore, air is able to come through your mouth and escape it freely without any kind of blocking. Whereas when you make a consonant, you are blocking the airflow by making your muscles touch each other or get very, very close to each other. Like when you go ka, 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 la, t, b, p. You're bringing muscles together or close together to stop or interrupt airflow. So basically, when you bring those muscles together too tightly and you keep them held together for a long time, and then when you open them up, you're quick to then close them back up again, you're essentially cutting the airflow off a lot and you're making everything more closed. Versus if you make sure that your muscles are quick to come apart every time they touch and you don't bring them together so strongly for each consonant, then you're able to relax the way that you're speaking and speak in a more open American way. Let me give you an example. I didn't know what you were talking about. 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 Now, I'm not mumbling in the second example, not mumbling at all. Hear how clear my vowels are? I didn't know what you were talking about. Very clear vowels. My consonants are also very clear, but I'm not holding the muscles together for too long before I break them apart. And I'm not tightening the muscles I mentioned before for all of those consonants every time they come up. So it really, really changes the overall sound. So the goal isn't to make your speech lazy, it's to make your movements more efficient. So you're exerting more effort in some places and a little bit less effort in others, but you're also aware of the exact correct shape of your tongue instead of just leaving it up to chance and letting your tongue land wherever it lands when you focus on relaxing it. Instead, you want to move your muscles in a conscious way with a specific goal. Here, if my tongue is wider, it'll make the sound more relaxed. Here, if I don't press the palate for as long, it'll make my tongue more relaxed. So you need specific goals, not just general advice. And that is exactly what you can expect from my one-on-one American accent coaching programs, where we work together in a private session, just me and you on a video call. And I examine the patterns and how your tongue muscles and your lip muscles tend to move in your native accent and show you exactly what to do with them to train them for a more native-like American accent. So we look at very, very tiny, subtle details that completely change how you sound overall. We look at the shape of your tongue, how wide or narrow it is, where it's placed generally inside your mouth, the manner in which it moves, all these subtle details that actually have a big impact on your speech and how clearly you communicate. And nothing about my advice or my instruction is superficial. I always provide very, very in-depth, detailed training on how to move your tongue and lip muscles exactly the same way an American does, exhibiting the same patterns. I never give overly simplified or generalized advice like you need to relax more or you sound more nasal, without also giving you very, very detailed information as to why you sound nasal or why your articulation sounds too heavy or too strong and not relaxed enough. I always look for and can pinpoint right away exactly what it is inside your tongue muscles or your lip muscles that is the root cause of why you sound one way or another and help you get to your goal for how you want to sound. My biggest and most important objective when I'm working with a client one-on-one is to make sure that they are aware of and in control of every single one of their mouth movements throughout speech. And as tedious as it may sound, I've developed a system that makes it much, much simpler to understand these patterns and to know how to apply them. So if you are a non-native English speaking professional and you are looking to improve your English communication skills, be sure to check out the link in the comment section or the description box down below. I'd be happy to meet with you on a free 15-minute consultation call to discuss your goals and how I can help you achieve them. That's it for today. Ciao!